My guest tonight needs no introduction, but I'll do one anyway. He has had more #1 albums than any other Australian artist, but his life story is so incredible it makes that fact seem insignificant. I have a deep and abiding love for this man. Would you please welcome the one and only Jimmy Barnes?
Great to see you.
First things first, you made headlines last week having a big fall on stage. Are you all right?
I've torn some muscles and I've got a big hole in my leg and my knee's a bit bunged up. I'm walking with a cane and not getting a lot of sleep. But it was. We were playing at the Mount Isa rodeo, and they finished the rodeo and put a stage together in a matter of a couple of hours, and there seemed to be one piece they forgot to fill in, and it was about 8 inches wide.
About Barnesy size?
Barnesy's leg wide. And I walked across it. I tweeted, it's just a silly stage I'm going through.
Well, at least being a rodeo, they would have had an ambulance right there.
There was everything there. And I felt like a wuss because I limped off. And I'm thinking, a guy had his legs broken, you know. There was a guy who had both legs broken, being thrown from a ball. And I'm complaining and, get me a wheelchair.
But the thing is, you still finished the show.
Of course, the show must go on.
Yeah.
I was in agony there. But you know what? And there was
Did the screaming go up a little?
That's the first thing I said. I walked over and I was like, shit, screaming and all this. And I went, the screaming, at least I scream for a living. So it's okay. and it went up a bit. I think I sang better that night.
Really? Yeah. So you've had more #1 albums in Australia than the Beatles.
Yes.
Is there a point where you realise you're an icon?
I think you realise that you're doing all right when you meet people in the street. And they talk to you, and they talk to you like come up like they know you, like you're part of the family. And then you realise that these people not only just come to your concerts, they play your songs at weddings. They play songs at funerals, the kids and stuff like this. It's really touching. So I don't see myself as an icon, but I've shared a life with a lot of people in Australia,
I think you are held in the same esteem as Far Lap in this country. I imagine.
Not with his leg.
Yeah, that's right. But
I'll be nobbled.
After the sad moment that you pass one day, it happens to all of us. But I hope that you are stuffed and mounted in a museum. But in another museum, they've got your liver.
Yes.
And the two, and we can admire them both.
One in New Zealand, Far Lap's liver. Next to Far Lap's heart.
Tomorrow, a documentary about your childhood, Working Class Boy, comes out. It's based on your memoir, which is an incredible read. And it takes you back to where you grew up.
This was the house that Reg Barnes and my mum had for us. And I remember arriving here and I thought it was a palace. Reg had bedrooms for with sheets on the beds and mattresses. We'd been sleeping on mattresses on the floor with no sheets and covered in flea bites and rashes and stuff. It's a cheerful watch.
I was going to say, it is amazing to see you back in those places.
Yeah.
What sort of a childhood did you have when sheets seemed like a palace?
Well, listen, I literally, when I was growing up, I thought it was quite normal, and unfortunately, in a lot of ways, it was because a lot of people were going through the same stuff. But when I started sitting down and thinking about it as I got older, we were subject to a lot of violence, a lot of domestic violence in the house. My mum and dad just belted the hell out of each other. Abuse, we were abused, physically, mentally, sexually in the house, Where I've seen people getting stabbed in our house, and stuff like that. I remember going out. This is the sort of people we sort of grew up around. One Christmas dinner we went to, I was sitting at the table, and this couple had 2 sons, one about 18, one about 17, and they'd had an argument over a packet of cigarettes, before we got there. And one son was hiding in the bedroom, and we all sat down to have Christmas dinner. And the son came out of the bedroom and grabbed his brother and cut his throat at the table. It was a pretty violent sort of upbringing.
Nowadays, that wouldn't happen, I don't know, unless the Wi-Fi went out or something like that.
That's shot now. Much cleaner wound.
And the story's amazing. Your mother, when you were about 8, your mother left?
Disappeared, yeah.
And disappeared for
years.
Like years?
Yeah, 3 years, yeah.
But she came back and you lived with her. How were you able to trust her again?
You know what? I'm 8 years old. They're the sort of the Oedipus, really. And I was a bit of a mummy's boy anyway. So after when my mum left and left us with my father, who was incapable of coping with himself, never mind 6 kids. So we were really, we were already really poor. We were already, not being brought up well. And after she left, it went really downhill rapidly. So by the time my mum came back, I was just like, oh, thank God you're here, you know. But unfortunately, things didn't get better, you know. It's like, you know, she did bring back, she found a guy to marry her to save us from being taken as wards of the state, a guy called Reg Barnes, who ended up being a really, you know, a great influence in my life. One of the only real shining lights in my life, you know, as a child. And he was a good role model. Reg was a devout bachelor who my mum worked with his sisters, and he only met my mum once or twice, and he overheard her saying that she needed to find a place for her children to live and a husband, and he said, I'll marry her. And just like that, out of the blue. And he'd never met us, and so suddenly he went from being sort of single to having a crazy Scottish wife and 6 juvenile delinquent kids. You know? So he was a saint. You know?
And you took his surname.
Well, after a little while living with him, you know, Reg was, like I said, Reg was such a great, you know, really positive, you know, guy for me. Always really, you know, good ethics, good morals, and he tried to sort of, you know, bring us up well. And I just thought, you know, after all the life I've had, he was the only guy that I looked up to. So, you know, I took his name, you know, and I made sure every time I went back to Adelaide that I told him, you know, I've got your name because I'm proud of you. I'm proud to be, you know, with you and not anybody else, you know. And you know, at least I got lots of chance to tell him that before he died, you know.
So, when in amongst all of that, did you start to think that singing could be your ticket?
Well, literally, my singing was my ticket from a very early age. And I mean, I grew up in, you know, in sort of dangerous sort of life, you know. And I found,
yeah, I've heard.
And even that was when I was in a band. but I found that if people liked you, you felt a bit safer, you know. So I always found ways to make people like me. And I used to sing, you know, at parties at the house and sing. When I went to school, you know, when I was 5, 6 years old, they started sending me all around all the classes singing and all that sort of stuff. I thought they were just trying to get rid of me. But so singing was something that always made me feel like people like me. And it was sort of, it was my way of escaping, really. It was, and literally when I joined a band when I was 13 years old, it wasn't a very good band, you know, and we're pretty bad. And then the next band I joined was Chisel when I was 16. I remember meeting these guys and thought, this is it, you know, they're getting me out of here. And I just thought to myself, if I never see Adelaide again, it'll be too soon. Because we just suffered too much there, you know. And it really took its toll on all of our kids, all of my siblings and myself, you know. You know, it was a battle. But, you know, and I tried to do this thing. I tried to be, you know, like, oh, of course they did the best with what they had and all that sort of stuff. But I was going to say, fuck them, they didn't. But so, can you say that on TV? Yes.
Well, you can now. So your first real band was Cold Chisel.
Yes, yeah.
And your first song was Sanh.
Yeah, I mean, we formed, rehearsed a couple of shows. I did a couple of shows in Adelaide, rehearsed, then moved to northern New South Wales, and then we started looking for record deals, and we were pretty wild, you know. I mean, but by the time I joined the band, I was already sort of out of control, and gangs and all this sort of stuff. So the band would do gigs, and we just get hammered and fight and do all this sort of stuff with each other. So we never got signed for years, and eventually we found this manager who said, oh, you know, you guys should rehearse a bit and get more songs. You know, people are starting to like you. And the first time we went back into a big rehearsal was Don Walker presented Sanh to us, and that was our first you know, single, and we released it, of course, and you know it got banned immediately.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing. It's now it's almost an unofficial national anthem. But that as your first song that you released as a band.
Yeah.
Did you think, oh, this is going to be easy?
Well, not really, because see, Cold Chisel was such a volatile and it was a pretty ferocious rock and roll band. And when we made that first record, I remember sitting thinking, you know, God, this is a bit tame, you know, it's a bit nice. The record wasn't really representative of the band. And you know, of all the songs that we were doing, you know, Sanh was like a country tune, really. And it wasn't until we played it live that it got sort of given life, really. But it was such a great set of lyrics. You know, I remember Don presented it one day at Soundcheck, and he said, "Oh, here's this song. We'll do it tonight." It's like a short novel, you know. So I had to learn the words, and I remember reading them and just think, this is such a great piece of writing, you know. So you know, I mean, I think very blessed to have, you know, a song that caliber, to get to sing a song like that and have that sort of associated as your first record. You know, I was really lucky.
Has Cold Chisel since then ever done a gig without playing K-Sound? Because I would imagine a venue couldn't get insured.
No, we always play it. We always play it. There's been, but in my solo shows, there's been a couple of nights where, especially in the old days when I used to get really drunk, where I forgot to do it, and people went nuts. You know, people went, "What are you doing? You know, how dare you?" You know, but it's so, and it's, you'd think after sort of 35 years that you'd get sick of playing it, but like I said, it is such a good song, such a great lyric, and it's still sort of really relevant now, to, you know, lyrically. So you know, I never get sick of doing it. And the other great thing about playing that song is, from the minute you play the intro, you see half the audience's eyes light up. So you know, you can't go wrong.
It's pretty magical. You mentioned drinking quite a bit.
Yes.
At your height, how much were you drinking and taking?
Way too much. I used to. You know, there's times when I used to drink, you know, 3-4 bottles of vodka a day. You know, I'd take, you know, copious amounts of cocaine and speed and, you know, ecstasy and anything else that was nailed down. If it was there, I'd take it, really.
How are you alive, Jimmy?
For a while there, I remember my liver asked for a transfer to Joe Cocker for a rest. No, I've got good genes. I've got good genes. I'm tough, and I'm really, listen, I'm very thankful to be here too.
I was going to say, if you had never found Cold Chisel, do you think I'd be sitting here with Jimmy Barnes today?
No, I don't think so, unless it was sort of, you know, this week behind bars. Because no, really, at that time, when I was 16, we were in gangs, we were fighting, we were hanging around with all sorts of unsavoury characters, and most of my friends from that period, most of them are either dead, in jail, you know, or heroin addicts or something like that. I've got a few friends who managed to survive, thank God, but most of them are gone. So I don't know where I'd be if I hadn't. I think music really saved me.
Where are you at now? Like, do you drink at all now?
What have you got? Just so happens. No, you know what? I in the old days, I used to drink, and I never drank for the taste of the play. I drank to get hammered. You know, and that was my intention, and that's what I did every day. Nowadays, you know, I can go and have a glass of wine with dinner, and you know, I'll sit with my feet up with the dogs in front of the fire and have a whiskey. But you know, I don't drink. If you compare what I call drinking before and what I call drinking now, they're not the same thing.
So that cycle, like growing up in such poverty and violence, and having really alcohol and violence as part of your life for a very long time, how do you start to break a cycle like that?
Yeah, well, you know, I mean, like, unfortunately, my dad used to, like, my first time I really drank whiskey was when I was about 2.5 or 3 or something like that. My dad used to wake us up every New Year and give us a glass of whiskey, you know, at midnight, because he was drunk, you see? And the first time I ever got really hammered drunk was when I was 8 or 9 years old. So I've drank and took hard drugs since an very early age. And, you know, and it took me, you know, 40 years to, you know, and I look at my life and my career, and unfortunately most of it's documented. So you were all there, you know. You know, I sort of, it was like, I've joked about it, but it's true. It was like the longest, slowest suicide attempt in Australian music history, you know. And I sort of tried to drink myself. I drank to forget, and then I forgot what I was trying to forget. And so, you know, it was. But it took me a lot of work, a lot of time, a lot of friends, and a lot of support. You know, I've got a great family. My Jane, my girl's one of the, you know, the great girl in the world, and she's been behind me the whole time. But I've met a lot of good people that helped me. And once, you know, and my kids. It's funny enough, my kids looked at me and said, "Oh, we're not doing that." So my kids are actually quite sensible, yeah.
Now, to a lot of people in this country, you and your music are emblematic of what it means to be Australian. What does that mean to you?
Well, you know, we like I said, we shared a period of a lot of people in this country's life when they were growing, and quite turbulent times, you know, like, it's the Star Hotel riots, you know, we never played at the Star Hotel. I've got people who are sure we played there, for instance. I have people come up and say, "Oh, I was there that night, you were fantastic." I haven't got the heart to tell them we never played there. But we were there in that period, and we were sort of kicking up against the rebelling against everything at the same time, and it was, I just think, I just feel blessed not only to have survived it, but you know, to have been able to share such an incredible growth time in Australia. You know, and we had a lot of problems in the old days in Australia, and we've still got a few now. Obviously, you've been watching the news, but it's, you know, I just think I feel, you know, music is a common language. Music. I'm like anybody else that's a music fan. I sit there and I hear a song, and it takes me back to a bad time in my life or a good time in my life. And I'm lucky enough to have actually sort of created stuff that does that for people as well. So that's a real, that's a real joy.
Now, to a lot of people in this country, you and your music are emblematic of what it means to be Australian. Mm-hmm. Recently, one story, Reclaim Australia was playing your music at their rallies, and you politely asked them to stop.
Yeah, I was really polite about it. I mean,
what was their response? Were they like, piss off back to Scotland, you foreigner?
Yeah, basically. And then I had sort of people writing, because I've got Facebook and all this for the career and stuff, and I got letters back saying, when the Muslimics take over, I hope they kill your kids first and stuff like that. It's absolutely ridiculous, So, but you know what? I don't give a shit. If they if they come around my place, they'll be in trouble.
Amen. Amen. Now, to something very different. You've had a lot of merchandise over the years.
Yes.
I have seen the Jimmy Barnes shortbread.
Yes.
That's it, the Jimmy Barnes shortbread.
I've got my kilt with me, actually.
I never go anywhere without it.
I'll take it everywhere now.
But my favourite, I ordered one of these. This is amazing. This is the Jimmy Barnes alarm clock. Imagine, if you will, there's the camera.
Imagine you're resting quietly.
Yeah, resting quietly, you're trying to sleep in. Imagine waking up to this. Wow.
When it arrived, because they finally made them and they sent them to the house, and I remember my granddaughter Rosie, she's like 2, and she thought it was hilarious, and she kept running around with it. But what we didn't know is you have to turn them off properly, by the way, because it'll pop up, it'll come back again any minute. Yeah, there you go. So Rosie left this in the toy box or something, and in the middle of the night I'm hearing, it sounds like somebody's been murdered, But it was me. That's actually my warm-up scream. That's what I do to warm up before shows.
With the kids, what were you like at singing lullabies? Because I imagine that wouldn't be the most relaxing vibe either.
They never got any sleep. But I talk about in the doco. My youngest daughter, Ellie Mae, was born very premature. 26 weeks she was born, so she spent a lot of time in neonatal intensive care. And Jane and I moved next door to the hospital so we could be with her 24 hours a day. And we always had, one of us had our hands inside the humidity crib, letting her know we're there. And Jane would be normally there, stroking her like that. And when Jane would go away, I'd open up the window and I'd sing to the baby, And I've said it's a wonder she survived. I was never really the one to sing lullabies. Go to sleep, or else.
I have to say the books are incredible. They justify their success, and the documentary Working Class Boy opens in cinemas tomorrow. Before I wrap this up, I just wanted to say I was lucky enough to be part of the New Year's Eve gig at the Sydney Opera House. But I wanted to say one of the highlights of my life was seeing you sound check in the middle of the afternoon out the front of the Opera House, singing Flame Trees, and you gave it 100% in the sound check. It was one of the greatest things I've ever seen.
Well, the thing is, a lot of bands, when they do sound checks what you do in the afternoon to make sure the equipment's all working, right? And I've seen a lot of young bands that get up there and they go to sound check and they mince about and just don't really do it, right, And then, of course, when they go on stage, it sounds completely different. So you've got to go up there and hit it with what you're going to do on the show. And whenever I do a show, I've got to give 100%. So that means I've got to do that at sound check too. And, there's people there watching it, particularly in that public place, the Opera House, there was people watching and stuff, so you want people to enjoy it. So I'm just a ham.
Well, I have never seen you not give 100%.
That's my job.
Would you please thank Jimmy Barnes?
Thank you so much, man. That was great. Thank you.